schedule, and they're able to manage the staff and the clients in the evening. That's it. Who wants to start next?
Pete, go ahead. Sure. Well, I'm Jay Preston. I'm with my father's house in Paola, Kansas. Anybody know what Paola is? Oh, wow. That's amazing. Okay. 5,500 people. We're just south of Olathe or Oval Park, a little further south. We recognized, I guess about 12 years ago, that there was homelessness in my hometown. And if you're from a rural area and you know about homelessness, you probably know that no one else in your area probably knows about it. It's really difficult, and we spend a lot of our time doing education. As far as I know, in Kansas, we're about the only thing in a town the size of 5,500, and it's really difficult to help folks understand that services are needed in rural areas. The misconceptions I think are that people will, from rural areas, can just run up to the urban areas and access those services and they'll be taken care of. We don't need to do that in our hometown. The truth is, I think our speaker yesterday said, build it and they will come. That was kind of what folks thought, is you're going to import, the hobos from downtown and we were going to litter Mayberry. We were going to just destroy the town with this shelter. And so we finally got the word out that we had homeless people. So we decided, since we had nothing, we decided to start with a transitional housing program first, because we felt like we wanted to make an impact that would help folks get housed and not just do an emergency shelter night after night after night. So we were funded, it'll be 7 years ago in January, 6.5 years I guess now, with a HUD transitional housing program that brings about $262,000 a year to us. And so we have a facility, it's facility based, that will house up to 42 individuals. There's 11 units, and it serves families and individual women. We don't yet have anything for men. That program has been fairly successful. Our numbers on we have to do annual progress reports for HUD, and those numbers have always been pretty good. Our advantage, I feel like, in a small community like ours, is that when folks move out, they don't disappear from us most of the time. They stay on our radar. We can work with them. We try to educate them about that idea that you don't have, if you're not moving far away, this is still your community. This is still your family. We can still help you. And so a lot of times, if there is an additional problem and they're about to lose housing again or whatever, we have a chance to prevent that. We work with landlords. We constantly are advocating for them not to be booted out of their housing over something that may be something we can fix, something we can work with. We do a lot of outreach, and nowadays it really is in the form of phone calls to us. We are known now. It's kind of become a one-stop shop because we decided we needed to fill gaps. We didn't want to duplicate any program that was being done well, but we know that there's a whole lot of stuff that's needed. Mental health services, just recently for us, the price schedule doubled for the sliding scale, and it has put that out of reach for many people now. And so we are on the front edge of a disaster is what we're seeing, that there are folks who are desperately needing that care and just are not able to get it. So we're going to be scrambling to try to figure out how to fill that gap. We've always been pretty good, though, I think, at partnerships, because in a small town you have to be. When we apply for our grant and you have to get matching funds for that grant, the representative that I was working with HUD called me specifically to talk about how it was a little humorous that we had like 50 letters that were going to cover our matching funds, and she said usually it's like, a corporation and a foundation or a couple things, and you've got all these letters, including a letter from a middle school girl for $120. She's going to do $10. And I told them, there's just no such thing as a small gift until you've got all your money. Everything counts, and so if you can't get two big things, you get a whole lot of small things. And so in small areas, if you're planning to do something like that, you have to be prepared to hit the bricks a lot and to get out, and every chance you get to speak and educate, do it, because people cannot help with what they don't know about. We just recently applied for a second grant, and it really, and with the help quite a bit of Manhattan Emergency Shelter, because they had kind of cut the way for this. We're going to do a transition in place program, which is we'll have a master lease on some houses. Only our intent is to spread now over 6 counties, because we see in these particular 6 counties increasing amounts of homelessness and poverty. If you go back and look at census data and accounts, you'll see that and that includes Ottawa and Fort Scott, probably most notably. And their problem with homelessness is right. So it will not cure that problem, but it will get our foot in the door, and we'll be able to start bringing some, hopefully some services to those counties. We think we've just finished the technical submission phase. Aggie's here today somewhere. I'm hoping she'll tell me yes, we have. But if so, we'll hopefully be starting fairly soon with that. We feel like that model is a good one to think about serving rural areas anywhere, because it allows you to put people back in their communities where their support systems are, where they know folks, where they're tapping into a food pantry or whatever. In small communities, we find churches a lot of times are their only support or their biggest support. And so it's important to keep folks where they are, I think. I can't imagine doing a 6-county facility-based program and that working at all very well. We also, because we're in a small community, we almost have to be a one-stop shop. So we see domestic violence. We don't have the luxury of having a domestic violence shelter down the road where we can put them, and they're specifically designed for that. So depending on how we try to evaluate how dangerous the situation is and whether we can do that or not. If we can, we do. If we can't, we try to utilize something in the city, Kansas City area. But we often have people, and this is just a cultural difference, in rural areas will not go to anywhere in the city to access services. That's why things in rural areas are needed. There's a cultural difference. The best example I have of this is before we started, the first winter we were down there working on our building to get ready. I got a call from a lady at a church, and she said there's somebody out on our lake in a tent. And it was like 18 degrees. I mean, it was really cold. And so I called City Union Mission, and they had space. And I thought, we'll get out there, get them, take them to the City Union Mission, and the catastrophe averted. When I got there, there was a young woman who was maybe 18, with a baby who was not a year old, in a tent with wind blowing like crazy, one of those little nylon Walmart tents. And I thought, man, this is, whew. And I'm glad this lady called me, we got this. I get out, and if you want, I'll pack your stuff up now, and you can set the car where you're warm, or I'll come back and get it. And I got a spot for you in the City Union Mission. And her response, she didn't move an inch, and her response was, I have enough problems. I'm not going down with the guns and the drugs. And her perception was she could not navigate that culture. It was foreign to her. So she was willing to stay in the tent with a baby versus going into a shelter where it was warm and she'd have food. So we bought her a couple of nights in a motel, and fortunately she had reconciled with her parents and moved back home, and it was all good. But that taught us just how important cultural differences are, and that, and also we found nobody from downtown much wants to come mix with us Higgs. You know what I'm saying? So the populations don't transfer like I think a lot of people think they will. We don't have that hardly at all. You're a little more urbanish than we are. Do you see that at all?
We see it
Some?
especially people coming from, we have a lot of people coming to Manhattan from Chicago. For some reason, we had a slow, we had a few people come that came because of Fort Riley, and now it's more and more and more family coming, and it's now a pretty large population, but living there and their culture is just so much different. We see that a lot, but even people coming from Kansas City, the services are different. I think they're just not used to, I think maybe we're in their business more too, because not that people in the urban areas aren't kind and don't care, but I think they have this perception that maybe they're just more of a number, and they don't get asked a lot of questions, and we ask lots of questions, and why they're here and what's going on, and every day we're checking up on them. So we find that a lot of people coming from those larger city communities don't last very long. They're the ones that seem to have the biggest problem with staying in the shelter and maybe being more accountable for their situations. But
that Chicago thing will eventually impact the quality of pizza in your town. The difficult person she was talking about a little while ago in Manhattan there that takes a lot of time and effort to serve, and typically it's somebody, it's somebody like I was actually. In fact, I was homeless in Manhattan, and I was that guy with chronic depression, alcoholic addict kind of thing on the street. I didn't see any other homeless people at that time. That was 1979. And I'd like to think I was the inspiration for your shelter. I've said that before. I think because people saw me eventually and said, we got to do something for people like that crazy man with the wild hair on the street. But that really is what drives my passion and what really was behind wanting to do something like this when we found out there was homelessness in our rural area. We intend to, in fact I talked with James a little bit yesterday about this, try to do something more with prevention and even some emergency shelter stay time, just because it is so absent from us. And we can't just take someone in immediately. Usually, we're almost always full in our program as well. So that's something we need to do. The future also, I think for us, we want to do some permanent housing programs that will primarily, probably the first will primarily aim at individuals who are on disability, who have some disability, who need housing, because those folks seem to be precariously housed constantly. The amount of income they have is just enough, and you've probably seen this, they get taken advantage of by other people and whatever. And so we'd like to do a project. We have 8 acres of land behind us that we'd like to use to develop that. So we're looking at that as an additional program. And so far as the future beyond that, I'm just passionate about doing whatever we need to do to house people in rural Kansas, because they just don't think a lot of folks know about it, so there's not a lot being done. So if you have questions, are we going to do that at the end, or can we do it?
Whatever you.
Yeah, I don't know how much time I've been up here, because see, I'm a preacher, so I'll just go on and on. But if you have questions, yes.
Well, what would your advice be to an area that does not really have any homeless services in the more formal sense, just more informally, in terms of, which is a suburban rural county, in terms of do we put our priority on the temporary shelter or the non-facility based temporary housing? That's, you know, so many of these different models, and any kind of program we would have would be small, but what's your sense as to what's got the most flexibility and sustainability?
What's the population of the county, do you know?
Well, the county seat is 13,000, and the county itself is something like 56,000.
And what county are you in?
Butler.
Butler, okay. Oh, I come down several years ago and spoke to a group in Butler, the initiative.
Probably BHI with
yeah,
Crystal Wallace.
several years
I volunteer
ago.
with them.
And I know they've been working hard, and they've hit a kind of a battle, I think, here that we didn't have. The city fathers in our town watched us closely. They never came out to see what we were doing. They didn't want to look like they were supporting it, but they weren't really opposed to it.
You didn't need to get a special use permit for a congregate facility?
No. Well, basically, our area just was already zoned, because this had been a nursing home.
Oh.
So it was already zoned right, and so we didn't get any permissions, or just the building code was all we went with. So far as what program to do first, that is so tough to call that. I think now with some of the new options that are going to be available on the emergency shelter side, you can do a little there and also do something that's more long term. Housing first is the big deal, and you may have heard them talking about housing first. And really that's what our transition in place program is going to be about. Because the idea would be we'll hold the master lease initially, put them in a home, and then we deliver services to them for the most part. At some point we want to add technology to that. So we'd like to place a computer with the internet every place so we can do some case management even daily online if we needed to or whatever. We're going to have to be creative to serve these folks in rural areas.
When they graduate from your program, they have to move out.
No, that's where I was going. When they graduate, the idea would be we just transfer the lease into the landlords, with the landlord to them. Hopefully by then, how we can convince a landlord, I think initially is, they're in our program. It's not like you have to evict them. We're going to manage it. We're going to help you with that. We're going to, on the front end, be with you, for you on this. And we want you to have the opportunity to see how good they're going to be as tenants. And so if these folks do well, hopefully transferring that lease is an easy thing. And so it has been then housing first, because they're staying where they and every study indicates that they recover from everything so much faster housing first. So if we had to do over again, I probably wouldn't be looking for a facility, which is what we did initially.
Yeah.
I'd probably be looking for the money to do, a couple offices and then the money to do housing first.
Well, your model gets around the special use permit problem. Across the country, it's pretty common for municipalities to say that a family is no more than 4 unrelated people.
Yeah.
Well, the minute you put 2 people with 3 children who aren't related, you need a special use permit.